Hello, and welcome back to your favorite podcast. This is me trying to incept you with that thought. And if it's not true, I don't want to hear it. But if you hit play, I feel like it's got to be true. Today's episode covers another hard truth that workplace norms are the problem, not the neurodivergent folks. And joining me today to dig into this topic is Tameka Allen. Tameka Allen is the founder of ModCulture, where she helps startups and scaling companies unlock brilliance, lead differently, and transform everything. With over 15 years of HR leadership experience across Fortune 500s and high-growth startups, she's seen how traditional workplaces often overlook the genius of neurodivergent folks. And through a mix of strategic advisory, coaching, and AI-powered insights, Tameka helps leaders build inclusive cultures that work for every mind, especially those who think differently. She's a certified executive and personal coach trained in positive psychology. But more than that, she's a transformational partner helping leaders evolve from within. Whether she's guiding talent strategy or reimagining leadership norms, her mission is simple: unlock brilliance, lead differently, and transform everything. Tameka, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Hiba. It's exciting to be here.
I know. I was like reading your bio and getting so hype about this episode. I was like, yes. Because I talked about this in the newsletter earlier this week. People listening to this episode was maybe a few weeks ago, where I did a call out about, it was a newsletter on confidence. And I did a call out about how people often mistake loud voices for the most confident. But when you are working or have neurodivergent folks, that's oftentimes not the truth. Their confidence shows up in very different ways. So I was so excited to then have you on the podcast and get into it. So this season, one teaser question I'm asking every guest at the start of every episode is just one general hard truth about work.
Ooh, yeah, this is a good one. That the culture of the term culture fit is punishing people with different lived experiences.
I feel like we stopped saying that forever ago, because I'm also like, why would we want everyone to fit into this box?
I still hear it. I still hear it a lot, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, everyone at work week has heard me be like, it's culture add. We are adding to our culture. We are not fitting people into this box that we want them to be in. I love that. Yeah. I feel like we need to get rid of that. So if you're still saying culture fit, time to cut it. So for today's episode, I really want to talk about like neurodivergence, how it shows up in the workplace, how to build workplaces that actually support people. Because it is a hard truth season. And something I've really observed is that work is really not built for all of us to be successful. So to kick it off, for those who might not know, can you tell us like what being neurodivergent means?
Sure. As a matter of fact, I'll slide in a couple of more definitions too, because this is one of the things when it comes to just foundational awareness that people often use a couple of terms interchangeably when they actually mean different things.
Good. Please teach me.
So neurodiversity is actually the umbrella of all the different ways in which we all think, right? So that's me, that's you, that's everyone listening to this podcast, right? Whereas someone neurodivergent is living with the condition that is causing brain differences that impacts how our brain works, right? And then someone neurotypical is going to lean more around those perception, thoughts, and behaviors that just naturally for them align with societal norms, right? So those three, while they are definitely connected, those are the difference between the three.
Well, you have to call me out if I use the wrong one at any point in this episode, because I am also still learning a lot of this too, right? This wasn't commonly talked about in the workplace until honestly a few years ago, which feels like a complete missed opportunity. And as you're thinking about like work and how we all experience the world differently, we're all also experiencing work differently, and how work gets done doesn't have to all look the same. And so I've been trying to do my best, like listening to things you're doing. I went to your talk at RecFest last year, like really trying to understand and open my mind to how do we build better environments for people where everyone can be successful regardless of who they are.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because we're definitely all still unlearning when you think about even just the Industrial Revolution after post Civil War here in the US. Those, of course, we still had sharecropping, of course, but also manufacturing and things like that really took off. And it was all around these repetitive tasks, doing work the same way. And I feel like we're still unraveling from that. as we talk about things that are relevant today.
Yeah, work does not get done the same way. It's honestly fascinating to watch too, as like you're managing and leading people, like thinking about how you would do a task versus how they would do a task
Mm-hmm.
is also just like a management and leadership capability. I think like the best leaders don't tell you how to do the thing. They tell you like, here's our desired outcome, and they let you do the thing the way you do it.
Correct.
But I watch so many managers fail and by saying like, well, I wouldn't do it that way. And I'm like, well, I don't care how you would do it. If the outcome's the same, why does it matter how it gets done?
And does it make it wrong?
Doesn't make it wrong. It's like wild. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
What's one workplace norm that we've accepted as the standard, but was never built with neurodivergent people in mind?
Yeah. One of the things that come to my mind is top talent will thrive in a fast-paced environment, right? And I get it. There are parts of business where if you are working on a go-to-market team, like you need to be following up on those leads. I get that, right? Things like that. But when it comes to, let's just take someone who's ADHD, for example, people automatically assume that those of us who are ADHD will automatically be hyperactive, spontaneous, and that we just push through all types of chaos. And while there is some truth that some of us really lean in ambiguity, you could have a handful of people who are ADHD and we all present differently. And there are different types of ADHD, right? You have inattentive, attentive, you have a combination of the two. And so even within those subsets, people will present differently. So here's where it gets problematic. In a fast-paced environment, and tech, it may seem like I'm picking on the tech space, but I see this there more often. We glorify multitasking. Like it shows up in our job descriptions, in our conversations with our teams, performance reviews. We won't even get on performance management, but even though neuroscientists have literally proven it's not humanly possible to multitask. It's not humanly possible at all. We can task switch, but even in our attempt to try to multitask, it decreases efficiency. Yet we glorify something that actually doesn't exist. So when I think about, we built this narrative that people with ADHD thrive in ambiguity, when that's actually not always the case. Some of us are great at that, but others of us, we fall into patterns. We like planning. That's where we perform at our best. And I think what we have to do is to piggyback on what you were saying, we have to let people work in the ways in which their brain works. And in the tech environment is one thing, like when we have a tech startup that's raised a Series A, for example, what's the first thing? Can I curse on here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I'm dying. I should have told you at the beginning. Tameka, I be saying fuck on this podcast like every week. So if I'm not allowed to curse, I've already broken it.
I just like to make sure.
No, of course.
The first thing they do when a tech startup raises a Series A is hire a shit ton of people,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And so usually at that point, if they don't have an ATS, they may have one that's really not going to carry them, or systems that are not going to carry them through that scale and through that growth. So in a situation where you have people, and this could be neurodivergent people, this could even apply to neurotypical people, leverage the folks that you have that lean in that ambiguity to help you through that scrappiness. And then use your systems folks, right? The people who really want to put those pieces together that follow a process or create one. Leverage them to help you create those processes that amplify your systems. I've seen this time and time again. I worked for a stint in customer success for HR software, ATS, performance management, all of that. And that was one of the common threads that I kept seeing was people wanted systems to fix a process problem. And so it's like we're underutilizing our talent. And if we were to leverage on that out-of-box thinking that neurodivergent talent tends to have, we can actually be more effective.
I love that point. I know so many people who are like, I need a system for this. And then there are other people like, I need a process for this. And it's always interesting working with people because you realize so quickly, like everyone is so different.
And here's the thing around, just one last piece around the fast-paced environments. Someone who is neurodivergent, who is not leaning in that ambiguity, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they're a planner or systems person.
Yeah.
Forcing them into that eventually leads to burnout. And we already have a high percentage of employees, even neurotypical employees, who are at the process of burnout, which impacts productivity. But it's not a good thing, right? So we need to work on creating new workplace standards that actually work for how humans are designed to function, instead of forcing us to do something that doesn't exist, like multitasking.
Yeah, but it does feel like a lot of times we treat neurodivergence as a personal issue instead of a systems design issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do you think we've done that? Do you think it's like really people don't know enough about it? We're scared. Like, what do you think it is?
Number one, that's usually the first part of what you say. Usually, the first thing I hear is, "Oh my God, I didn't know." Right? And once people have an understanding of what those experiences are like, now there's more clarity, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I'm open to learn more." You get a few that don't get there as easily, right? But a couple of things come up for me. One is a lack of empathy. Whether the person says, "Oh, I don't know," and then they lean into tell me more about how this works. Someone who may be more resistant, one key ingredient is a lack of empathy. So when someone discloses an invisible disability and they share their work preferences, you may have some leaders that are, for whatever reason, are dismissive of those experiences that someone is sharing. Um, and so that leader may not have close proximity to that to understand what that experience is like. So if someone has said, um, if someone has a child that's neurodivergent and they're in the education system and they're on an IEP plan or a 504 plan, they get what that process is like, right? Without understanding that those kids, their parents are at work. Neurodivergent conditions are highly genetic in nature many times, and we already have neurodivergent talent in our pipelines. They're already on our teams. And so lack of empathy and not understanding that our brains can often operate like a computer. So if this experience really happened, an employee was experiencing sensory overload. They had already disclosed, they told the manager about it. The manager was dismissive and basically told them they just need to try harder. Right. So I get this situation, talk with the employee, and then I talk with the manager. And they literally could not understand. They thought the employee was just making excuses, even though at this point they had disclosed, like we had gone through the accommodations process and everything. And so when I spoke with the manager, I said, well, think of it this way. They didn't understand what the employee meant by sensory overload. I said, well, think of the brain as like a computer. And if you've ever had your computer open with a million tabs, right, in a window, eventually having too many open will start to slow the system down. It might freeze. It might even just crash. That's kind of an example of what sensory overload can be like for someone who's neurodivergent. And so when I gave that example, the manager's eyes just got really big, because in that moment they realized, oh, they had no idea what that was like, right? And I think there were some other things that I think the manager became a bit defensive about with the employee, assuming they were making excuses, but actually after talking with them, they were able to come to this realization. And then from there started to be more open to learn, right? So if someone on your team, for example, was blind and needed Braille to read work-related material, would you actually suggest they should try harder so they can see? No, right? And so this is the difference is one disability can be, see, there's evidence there that they can't see, whereas another condition, it's not visible. We can't tell if someone is neurodivergent from the outside many times.
Yeah, I always talk about how I have a thyroid condition called Hashimoto's. It's like very common, like 90% of women have it, but it's often called like an invisible illness because it's not every day that I show up and I'm like, I have the symptoms. It's like when times are really stressful, I can feel really tired for like days afterwards, almost to the point where like it seems like I'm just absolutely, the tank is empty and I can't move for hours. Like I sometimes after like big events, I need like a few days to recover because my body is just like not used to it. And it's like a very common illness, but I often talk about it when people are like, oh, well, I had like no idea. And I was like, okay, so like I'm one person with one illness. Now, there are so many things we don't know about other people. So instead of assuming that we've like built the right system and that everybody is going to be able to be successful here, maybe look at the individual and ask yourself, like, what do they need to be successful here?
Yeah, yeah.
But that empathy is missing from so many people, Tameka.
It is. It is. And I have a really quick story, and this is really helping understand how that empathy is not there. I think a lot of that has to do with sometimes we tend to be in our own bubbles and we don't experience how different people live, cultures, things of that nature. So me and my husband actually RV full time for like 4 or 5 years.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And it was just really literally on a whim. And it was interesting because we were like in North Texas, and we were at this resort, and it was a couple next door, and this was during the pandemic, right, in Texas.
Oh gosh.
And many times, I mean, full transparency, we're usually the only ones, right? And the people who were in the site next to us, it was news around people protesting in downtown Houston. This was after George Floyd, and older gentleman, he said to my husband, I just don't understand why people are so upset, blah, blah, blah. And so he was, it's a whole thing. So my husband sat outside and talked to him. Now, full disclosure, many people assume certain things about me and my husband because he's a retired veteran. He served in the Navy. And so when he sat down and talked with the man and just explained to him, right, older white man, why that was the case, my husband found out he had never, like, he grew up in rural Texas. He didn't grow up around Black or brown people. He didn't have Black or brown friends. Like, it was just so many things he was ignorant to. And so with my husband, we kind of built up a rapport with him, and my husband shared this with him. He said, I didn't know. Nobody told me this, right? And I feel like those are the experiences a lot of times that I have with leaders around neurodivergent talent. They honestly don't know unless situations like this happen, I intervene, or if they're in close proximity to it, if they have a child or a sibling or someone else who's experienced it, that's usually when that empathy will kick in.
That makes me sad. Sorry, there's this stat about how fiction readers are more empathetic because you've like read through the experience of so many other people. And I'm a huge avid reader, and I talk about how that contributes a lot to like why I think I'm good in the HR role and why I think I have a lot of empathy for people, because I've made the effort to go like learn about other people's experiences. But I meet so many leaders that are exactly the ones you're describing. Oh, well, I had no idea. And it's like, if you want to be a leader, I believe this, I will stand by this. If you want to be a leader today, unfortunately, the I don't know excuse doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You want to be that leader. You want to be the person who inspires people, who motivates people, who moves work forward. You cannot say, oh, I just didn't think about that.
Especially now, because, the neurodivergent community is around, here in the US as well as globally. Ironically, the numbers are around the same, around 20% of the population. Well, there was some recent research came out as of a couple of months ago through Disability In that said we're on trend. And I'd already seen this from another institution out of California. But now this recent 2025 research revealed that we are on trend. By 2040, the neurodivergent population globally will be between 30 and 40%. Which is why we're seeing more of it now, because we have more context of what that looks like. Like even research, really, really hope that we get to the point where we study this more deeply, like even around autism. Around 64% of autism research is done on white college-educated men.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other people who have autism.
Yes. Yep. I found that very interesting, right? So even within this community of neurodivergency, we have these gaps, right?
Yeah.
That need to be full. People assume autism looks one way, right? When that's certainly not the case.
I'm going to think about that stat for the rest of today. I'm going to go tell that stat to like every single person I know. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That it impacts your experience so much. Yes, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be with you. I'm going to manifest good in this world. I'm going to hope we do more research that tells us more, because you're right. Just doing research with like a majority of one group doesn't really actually tell you much about how to unlock that experience and build better workplaces for everybody who would be in different groups.
Oh, I got a story. Okay, I got a quick story. We can move on because I know we got other
No, I love
questions.
this. No, I love it. Your stories are giving me life. Your stories are teaching me a lot.
So I'm at this event. I was invited to an event that was actually focused on the topic of neurodiversity around mostly life, personal things, a little bit of things around work, not a whole lot, but it was around, a lot of that was around entrepreneurship. Many of us tend to flow that way because sometimes we just don't feel safe going into corporate spaces, right? And so I'll never forget, I was talking, it was cool because you got to, show your badge and identify whether or not you wanted to interact with people or if you just want to keep it to yourself. And there was a clinical practitioner. We were chatting, and this person said to me when I shared what conditions I live with. So I have ADHD, but I'm also on the autistic spectrum. And the person, they looked at me and said, "Oh, I saw your ADHD, but I really don't see autism in you." This is a clinical practitioner, had never seen my medical records, my assessments. And I'm gonna be honest, I had to go outside and take a breath. And there was another clinical practitioner who happened to be a Black woman who came outside. And because she saw the look on my face, I was just so in the moment, just processing, did this person just say that? So she came outside and she said, "I'm so sorry." She said, "I saw what happened." And I was just like, "I just don't understand," right? And she said, because many times, and I've heard like one of your HR therapies on menopause and how doctors have very little training in medical school around menopause. And apparently the clinical community, psychology, psychiatrists are similar. And if you don't intentionally go look for more education around intersectionality, around conditions, you will be stuck with that same training you got 20 or 30 years ago. And even today, because we still have such a high percentage of autism research that's done on white college educated men, right? You may be stuck in the 60s with your thinking and you're actively assessing and diagnosing people. And that's how things get missed, right? Because you're assuming it's going to look one way and you have a whole medical degree.
First of all, F that practitioner for saying that to you. That is wild that you would be, I mean, okay, not wild. Like, let's say you've only read the research or whatever, like exactly what you said. You're reading the majority of the research. You're not thinking about how this impacts other communities. But like, what a gross thing to say out loud. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And honestly, thank you for sharing that with me, because that's another thing I'm going to think about today, because that's not how I want to ever show up in the workplace, where I think like, oh, well, this isn't as it seems. Like, when we take things at face value, I feel like you miss the opportunity to uncover so much more of who someone is or what is the actual problem. And in HR, this, we're problem solving all day long.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the problem is not the problem as it is presented. How often has someone come to you and been like, this person's a low performer? And you do the work, you do the research. You're like, no, they were never told that was part of their job.
Correct.
It was never in their JD. Their manager's not been giving them feedback. They were never delegated that task. It's not a performance problem.
Yeah.
Honestly, put that on my gravestone. It's not a performance problem, because every time someone comes to me with a performance problem, I'm like, I just know this is going to be something else completely. But I think about that too with like neurodivergent folks. I'm not just like, you can't just walk up to someone and be like, well, you're not presenting the way I think you should be presenting.
Yeah, so
wild work.
That's the part where, as far as why we think it's a personal problem and not a systems problem, I think about one of the other things is really quickly is when it comes to leadership, I think all leaders should be coaches, like really literally train and go through training around the real art of coaching, because it's really all about asking questions, being curious, right? And not jumping to conclusions when it comes to situations, really digging into this to see, where did this come from, right? When did this start? How did I contribute to this? How can I support you, right? Because coaching is often about finding the answers the person has. But here's the thing about it: the leader has to be coachable. They have to be. They have to be willing to lean into that growth mindset versus that fixed mindset.
But I feel like so many leaders are not coachable. That's an episode for another day. I'm going to bring you back on for that one, because that is a whole other topic where, like, do you actually want to be better or not? And I think the average person, sorry if this offends people, does not actually want to be better. They want to keep doing the thing they're doing. It's gotten them so far. They don't see the need to evolve. And I think truly great leaders, like you said, are trying to be more self-aware, are trying to improve their capabilities, are trying to be those coaches. And I see that like few and far between. I think it's quite rare. Damn, I didn't think I was going to get this emotional on this episode.
No, it's okay.
Episode ends with me and Tameka crying, both of us.
Oh, it is. We have a lot of work to do.
So much. We have so much work to do.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do.
I have to bring up the word only because I hear this all the time. How does professionalism become a code word for conformity and masking? Because I hear that's not professional all the time. And I'm like, ooh, but what do you mean? Tell me more.
I think the first thing I think about is, okay, what does professionalism mean?
Yeah.
Right? What's the meaning of the word? So I think about definition says something around being reliable, being respectful, being capable. But a lot of the things that we associate with being professional has nothing to do.
Literally nothing.
Who coined this? Almost like what I used to say, I would see runway fashion shows. I'm like, who decides if this is going to be a trend? Right? Because sometimes I don't necessarily go with the trend. I'm like, it's just not me.
Yeah.
But if it's you, do your thing. But I feel the same way around the word professionalism. And so we think about communication styles, assuming, speaking quickly, making small talk, reading the room, right? Body language, giving direct eye contact. I know that's a big one. Like, go on LinkedIn on any given day, and if candidates are not giving direct eye contact, if they're off camera, automatically it's something wrong. I get we're in the age of AI and there's a lot going on, but this has been an issue before the AI craze, right? Not just making assumptions, a firm handshake, tolerating interruptions. Quick story. This was many, many moons ago, when early on in my HR career, and it was literally, we were having water cooler moments. We were in the office, we had the mailbox section, we had the water cooler over here. And I can remember even then being in an office and at some point just naturally, just intuitively wanting to turn the light off, and I would open the blinds to let natural light in. What I didn't know was I was overstimulated by fluorescent lights. And sometimes shutting my door, because my office literally sat in the middle of this office section, and right outside my door were the mailboxes and the water cooler. So people would gather there and be chatting. And if I'm focusing and concentrating, I was just like, oh my God, I just can't. I need quiet. And so I would just gently shut my door. And I remember my boss at the time, in our one-on-one, said, "You were being curt the other day." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't understand." And she said, "Because I shut my door, because I didn't come out and congregate with everyone, that I was being curt." Well, what she and I both didn't know in that moment was I was overstimulated. That's why I shut the door. And so we talk about this idea of professionalism. We tend to think of people showing up one way. If you're not doing this, you're not professional. Well, I think about it wasn't too long ago that it would have been unprofessional for me to have locks. And I had locks way before the Crown Act was passed, like back in 2012, right? Because we have, again, going back to our patriarchal roots, right? Are we presenting a way that the powers would be say that we're supposed to present, right? And it makes me think about this, the wheel of power and privilege, and how obviously those who have identities closer to that power in the center are going to have advantages, right? Often make these rules that other people are trying to abide by. And also, unfortunately, those who intentionally present closer to that power are going to get the advantage, and anyone who doesn't, right, tends to have challenges and issues.
I'm just reflecting on my professional career to date, where I've just been like, do you ever have those moments where you're like, am I the problem? And then you realize you're like not the problem. It's really the system. Everyone's understanding of certain terms. They want you to be a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way. And I've always found that so challenging. Like I've shared the story, like my parents were immigrants, so they never used like common sayings in the home. So when I got into the workplace, everyone's like using these sayings. And I'm like, what the fuck do any of these sayings mean? Like, I'm like, I don't know what any of these mean. Like, why do they keep saying this? And I like realized that they're just like contemporary sayings that people use, but like we never used them. And it was like such an outsider feeling for so long. I like felt like I never belonged in any workplaces. And so when the conversation around professionalism and this concept of like what is professional started being had, I like really had to do, like you said, a lot of unlearning on like what I thought being professional meant, and actually like return to some pretty hard experiences I've had in the workplace.
I'm so sorry you experienced that.
I mean, you too. Like we're going through it.
It's, and I don't know about you, but I know for me, my parents were older. So my parents are both deceased now.
So
I'm
sorry.
in my 40s, but they would have been in their 80s had they lived today. And they were both a part of the second Great Migration, moving from literally Mississippi and Alabama up to the Chicago area, where I was born and raised in Hammond, Indiana. And as I've been going through this unlayering, like literally since the pandemic, just peeling back layers, realizing things intuitively I felt like I already knew. But what I realized was these things that they innocently taught me, right? Because for them, they were born in the late 30s and early 40s. They were in survival mode.
Yeah.
There were things they had to do to survive. And the way that they raised me and my siblings, it was really to conform because that's what they knew, right?
Yeah.
And so now I realize over the last few years that many of the things, I mean, it started even just something as simple as my hair, right? Before locking my hair, I had always had some type of chemical processing in my hair, right? Or some kind of manipulation, whether it be the press and curl, the jerry curl, the relaxer. And when I did go natural to lock my hair, that was the first time I ever remembered seeing my natural curly hair, right? And something as simple as that, I feel like a lot of those things are carrying in the workplace now around neurodivergent talent. And because we often mask so well, right? And so for anyone who doesn't know what masking is, it is us adjusting behavior so that we're not showing up as ourselves. We're fitting in, but not for the sake of not being real, but for the sake of self-preservation and protection. And many times we're doing that subconsciously and we don't even realize we're doing it.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I mean, like you, I didn't wear my hair naturally curly in the workplace for over a decade. Nobody knew I had curly hair. I wore my hair straight to blow out. I had a boss, an early boss once tell me like, your curly hair is not like professional, and like you shouldn't wear it curly because like it makes you stand out, and like we shouldn't stand out. She was also from an underrepresented community. So it was a very interesting time. And then during the pandemic is when I really I couldn't go get my weekly blowout. And I couldn't have my hair straight all the time. And I started wearing it curly, and friends who I had had for years at that point had never seen my hair curly. Coworkers had never seen it, who had known me for years at that point had never seen it curly. And it was such an interesting thing to think, like, for so long, it's almost like you try to hide who you are because you don't feel accepted by the environments that have been built at work.
And that contributes to that burnout and exhaustion.
You're like, am I ever going to fit in anywhere? It's like the thought you always have. Will I ever belong? And that's just like really hard. And it like makes me think about, like we talked about culture fit earlier, but like I just feel like that term just penalizes anybody who's different, who shows up in any sort of different way. Are
Well,
there other things that we're using in the workplace that we should be aware of that could be doing that too? Like meetings, even reviews. I think of meetings a lot, actually.
meetings are a big thing, especially given the time. We have all this technology now.
Yeah.
And I just think about, let's just go with the idea of a couple of things coming to my mind. One is just setting expectations for a meeting with an agenda.
Yep.
This is what we're going to be talking about. Here's what I would love for you to bring and give us an update on, whatever the case may be. And I think about, it makes me think about, I went through, if you've ever been to, Disney has an institute. I know Disney's been under some fire here lately, but Disney has an institute where they actually train leaders and companies to create magic in their industry.
Fun.
Hands down, like the best training, one of the best trainings I've ever been through in my life. At the time I was working in healthcare HR. And so I'll never forget, I think about having an agenda. Not having an agenda can often tend to create wasted time in a meeting. The meetings run over. You're like, what did we actually get accomplished? And how this could also benefit someone who's neurodivergent. And it has people think, well, they should be able to speak on the fly. What part of any major life decisions? Some people maybe, but for the most part, serious decisions around how a business operates, generating revenue, all of those things, like why not plan for those meetings so they can be effective? But I'll never forget one of the organizations that was there at this training, they talked about how they dealt with not just creating an agenda, but they also had to prove how much time we're wasting in these meetings by not planning. They literally had what was equivalent to like a clock, and it didn't show everyone's individual salary, but collectively it was tallying up how much money it was costing to be in this meeting. And afterwards, if we didn't get anything done, look how much money we just spent in this meeting and we weren't effective. And I think about when comes to something as simple as just having an agenda, not only does it help the neurodivergent talent collect their thoughts, be prepared in those moments, be better prepared, it also helps neurotypical folks too, to be able to leave the meeting and say, this could have been an email. I could have been doing something else, right?
Anything else. Yeah.
Live, in person, well, whether it be virtual or live experiences, if you have someone who is neurodivergent and they are not speaking up, especially something that's been brought up on the fly, or maybe they weren't prepared to talk about, their silence doesn't mean they have a lack of intelligence, right? Sometimes I don't even process well things in the moment. I need time to reflect and think about it before I respond. But I also think about, there was this, in a past role, there was an in-person employee retreat. We all got together in one location.
I feel like I already know where this is going. Okay. We're all in person, one location.
And there was an idea to some things around the business to have what we refer to as a hackathon, coming up with ideas of different things we can do in the business based on customer interaction, all of that. And so we're in this huge room. I say huge room, but it wasn't really that huge. Maybe 150 people, what have you, but it was just enough space for us to be in there. And all of a sudden, people get together in groups and boom, all the talking just boom. And there was an echo, so it made it worse.
Oh no, I hate those rooms.
And I will never forget, an employee was overstimulated and literally had to leave out of the room. And so when I got wind of it, speaking with them, they were like, I just cannot, I am overloaded. I just need some quiet, right?
Yeah.
But then the manager took it as the person wasn't engaging. They weren't showing executive presence because they weren't engaging with everybody, right? What did they contribute? And it's just like, this is something this is a great way to be able to understand why not just to pull on neurodivergent talent to find out what can we do better, but to actually get to know the person, to have some context to understand this is not a good situation. Like that, situations like that could have been prevented. It's like, could we have had an extra quieter space, right, for people to be able to chime in when they needed to, or some type of noise canceling headphones for them to just kind of take things in for a moment, or just give them the context of what the activity was going to be so they can come in and be able to share those ideas in another way. So I think of those kind of situations. I think about when it comes to meetings of doing what you know you can do in virtual meetings, turning on those captions, providing agendas in advance. But also, this is the value of, if you're listening to this, you likely already have leaders on your team who are neurodivergent. They may be masking to the point where you don't know, but this is why we need to be open to taking in ideas and collecting feedback, right? Assuming you provide a space for people who feel safe to do that, of how could this experience have been better for me? How could it also impact and benefit other people? So we can stop penalizing folks for something that their body is naturally doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's a mic drop moment right there, actually, because I feel that you were describing the story with the room at the retreat, and I was like, I'm overstimulated hearing this story. Like, when it gets loud and then multiple people are talking and then you can't hear it, it just like sets me on an edge a lot of times. And it's so interesting because I'm someone who thinks she is quick on her feet. Like, I do talk up in meetings quickly and I do say things. Lately, though, I've been really trying to practice like more intentional listening and like holding back on that quick response, where I like actually sit in what is being said and I think thoughtfully about what it is I want to say. And the response has been, multiple people have asked me, hey, are you okay? Like after the meeting when I'm not speaking up, they're like, hey, are you okay? You were like really quiet during that meeting. Like, we know you had something to say. Like, is everything okay? And I haven't really told them, like, I'm just trying to like be a more intentional listener and like be more present in the conversation and then spend more time being thoughtful about what I'm hearing and before I give you a response. But it's been really interesting to watch a lot of people who I think are pretty self-aware and also like know about neurodivergence still default to thinking that there is something wrong with me or I'm upset about something because I'm not ready at that moment to perform for them.
And that's how strong that norm is.
Yeah.
To automatically assume that something is wrong. Instead, maybe someone is working on changing a behavior or just being curious and asking, hey, I noticed you, not assuming something was wrong, but just inquiring. I noticed you weren't as participative as you have been in the past. Do you have thoughts or
how else? Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I think in the moment sharing, forcing people to in the moment share, one is like also a really unsafe feeling. Cause it's like, nobody is going to have like a great thought put on the spot. I mean, maybe some people, like, I think I'm like a quick person, but like, even I would say, I don't think I have like the best thoughts. Like if someone's staring at me saying, give me your thought right now. And it's just, it feels like unsafe when people are like, that's the only way you can contribute. I'm like, no, there are other ways. They can like, you can leave them with questions to answer after. They can, in writing, give you their thoughts. Like, not everybody has to have a response to the thing you ask them in the moment. And the more you get used to there being a feedback loop, not in the moment, I think just like the better partner, leader, manager, friend you become.
I wonder, where does that come from?
That we want people to respond right away.
Yes.
Probably like that urgency, our fake made up sense of urgency that everyone has. Urgency is made up. It is fake. We are not ER doctors. No one is bleeding out.
I love a good legal show.
Okay.
If you ever think about any show like Annalise Keegan, I can get away with murder, Viola Davis.
Yes. Oh, Viola
but
Davis.
In reality, if you know anyone who's a lawyer who spends time in a courtroom, they will tell you that is not what that looks like.
Fair.
It's not reality.
Fair. No.
So I always wonder that, where does that come from, to try to understand how do we get to establish these norms that we are holding on to with no evidence that this is the way things are supposed to be.
So many reasons. I don't know. That could probably be a whole other episode for another day. Cause I think about that a lot too. And I do think a lot of it has to come down with, I've worked at early stage startups. So I feel like a lot of it is the urgency in early stage startups. Like people are like, everything has to be answered right now. And I'm like, does it really? I could take 30 minutes. Like I could take a day. I could take 48 hours. Like maybe your answer will get better the more time I can sit and marinate on this answer. But I do feel like, especially in HR, we have this like firefighter hero type that we feel like a lot of HR people feel like we're constantly running into different chaos scenarios that we have to solve right away. And I feel like that is carried out through a lot of our organizations as well. So like maybe it's just like work in general. We've like glamorized productivity and urgency far too much that we've defaulted to the best person in the room is the one who's being the loudest and has the first thought, rather than everyone in the room should have the opportunity to be the best regardless of when they respond. I feel like I'm in therapy right now. This is great. Every episode of this podcast, I say that, and everyone's like, God, she needs to go to real therapy. I do. Okay. I want to wrap up with a few, like, I like to look at the future, think about better systems. But first, before I get there, myths and misconceptions. Can you tell me a few myths about neurodivergence in the workplace that we need to just end immediately?
Yep. We are a monolith. We present, look, speak, act, behave the same way. We don't.
Love that one.
Our differences are deficits. It's a myth.
That's a good one.
We would be a lot more successful if we actually embrace some of those differences and at least explore them.
Hell yeah.
Right?
We would. Yeah.
We talk about innovation in the workspace a lot. You can't create innovation with everything being the same.
Yeah.
That's not what innovation means.
That's such a good point.
We are just in the tech field, right? I hear that a lot. People make those assumptions that people who are neurodivergent, that we're in the tech field, they're all engineers. It's not true. We're everywhere. Again, we just need to try harder. And we need to be more resilient. If anyone listening has if you even ever experienced an anxiety attack, whether you're neurodivergent or not, think about showing up every day, having to manage through sensory overload and going into spaces that operate very neurotypically. That showing up every day is resilience on steroids.
No. I had a job that used to give me anxiety attacks. It was awful.
I mean, something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Really.
Same.
On anyone.
Same.
So these
Truly
myths, and it just comes from, like I said, this thing we're detaching from of sameness. And that there's no one who will, if you took, I'll never forget, executive leader who was a mentor of mine years ago. He said this in one of his presentations. I'm like, oh, that's so brilliant. How boring and uninteresting would a picture be, a coloring page, if it was all the same color? If it was all the same color, the Crayola box, you open it up, all the crayons are the same. You're putting it on the picture. There's nothing magical that's happening there.
Not for me.
Right?
Yeah.
So I would say just those myths are things that we need to release and let go of.
Yeah, that feels so hard sometimes. I mean, like the active practice of unlearning has, one, made my life substantially better. To like unlearn just like things you saw growing up, that the way people are portrayed in television shows, just all the things that you've seen, and then you've carried that into your perspective and lived experience as you were encountering people potentially from these communities. And unlearning can be so powerful, but you have to like actively practice and want to do it.
And it's uncomfortable. It's not going to feel good.
No,
it is uncomfortable.
There's so many parts of me that I've had to confront too, where I was like, was that reaction one that was rooted in racism? Like, you have to be able to ask yourself those questions and dig deeper and not be afraid to say, yes, that was an action that was rooted in a bad place, and here's how I could actually adjust it so I don't do that ever moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just like on that quest for the rest of my life, I think. Like, my dad and my brother were professors. My sister has her PhD. Like, we are lifelong learners in my family. And so I feel like unlearning for me has been hard but easy at the same time, because I'm excited about throwing away concepts and things I once thought were true and actually learning where they are rooted in and how they came to be is super powerful. So
Wow.
with that, if we were to build a better workplace and think about designing something, what would a workplace designed with neurodivergent people, not just around them, but to include them, what would it look like?
It would look like leaders giving space for their teams to be a culture add versus a culture fit. We will build rapport and create a safe space to share without judgment, even if we don't agree.
Yeah.
Regularly asking your teams on feedback around things to really honestly learn. I realize that we have a formal accommodation process, so I don't want to take away from that because that is needed. But not initially when someone discloses to you. So less than 4% of employees at work disclose a disability. That's disabilities, period, right? So
Less
that
than
includes
4%?
neurodivergence. Less than 4%. Because statistically, it doesn't end well.
No, it doesn't.
And I mean, we talk about these high percentages of, there was a survey done and a report exploring discrimination under the ADA, that a third of survey respondents with disabilities indicated they experienced negative bias in the workplace, underestimating, being insulted, excluded. Coworkers appear uncomfortable because of their disability, even if they couldn't see it. Almost like
disgusting.
If you trigger warning, if you've ever known someone who had a terminal illness, and then once they told people started acting different because I don't even want to make up reasons why, but similar when a candidate or employee discloses a disability, they're taking a risk because statistically it does not end well, right? So versus us jumping to assumptions of not believing and trying to prove, I get there are certain things that have to take place in the accommodations process, but just a human experience. Don't jump to dismiss and minimize the person's experience that they're sharing with you. Because real talk, because we have employees who don't disclose as much, that tells me there may be a sense of safety for them to even take the risk in telling you.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that might get harder after disclosing than getting easier. It's not a cheat code. I think that's what impression some people have. Like, why would I wish I didn't have to tell you this.
Yeah,
but
I wish I didn't have to ask.
Right? And that's not me having shame around my experience or what I live with, but it's a risk. It's not a flex to that you think it's going to help me get through this interview process easier or make it easier to do my job. It's just leveling the playing field, right? So us creating these more universal spaces and just leaders starting with the thought of not everyone is going to think the same. There's not one way to accomplish something. If we could design spaces with that one thought in mind, we could make some more changes.
What a basic idea that everyone could do easily with no budget and zero resources. And yet so many people still struggle with it.
Yeah. That's a systemic problem.
It's a huge systemic problem. Like, I also think about like how managers and leaders sometimes gatekeep neurodivergent employees from succeeding from either their own misunderstanding or their inability to see it. Like you said, like, oh, they think it's a cheat code. Like, no. What are some subtle ways that like managers actually accidentally gatekeep? So like we have this system, you gave us great ideas for how to think about building the system better. Going one step further into managers, what are some behaviors that we should be on the lookout for if managers are like gatekeeping neurodivergent employees from succeeding?
I think about there was a post on LinkedIn, and it was just talking about how oftentimes managers and leaders are not actually trained or developed to be leaders.
Yep.
They're often promoted because of their performance as an individual contributor, not based on leadership. And then they're given a title. Yes, you may show them some logistical things, how to approve PTO, all of that. This is what our performance process looks like. But because there's this gap we have of actually developing leaders, right, in real time and action for everyone. Now think about how magnified that is when you're dealing with an employee who's now a bit different from the rest of your team, right?
Yeah.
So I say all that to say it leads to a manager assuming the neurodivergent person is the problem. And like you said earlier, let's dig into the situation. Okay, how did this come about? When did this first start? What did you do, right? What did you say? What direction did you give them? When you start digging back and peeling back all those layers, a lot of times we'll find there's some other contributing factors here, right?
100%. It's the manager. They're always the problem.
And how bias can blind leaders from managing people fairly, right? So we think about this whole thing around, when I hear people say this, I literally cringe, that they want to hire people they want to go have a beer with.
Absolutely not.
So first of all, I don't even drink beer. Second of all,
so I don't want you hanging out with these employees. I want them to do their work and go home.
And I think about how something as subtle as, I heard you talk about this on your episode with Jen Laurie around this idea of happy hours, right? And how that excludes a lot of people. We don't even think about somebody could be a recovering alcoholic.
Yeah.
And can't not be around that alcohol. Or some people just may not be able to just don't want to drink.
Yeah.
Right. And I think about this for someone who is neurodivergent in a situation like that. They may not want to go into a bar or restaurant where they're going to be overstimulated.
Definitely not.
Right.
It takes people being intentional about everything at work to like really actually include everyone.
Right. And so if you're judging someone for not coming to a happy hour, what are you doing with their performance review?
Yeah, it's probably
how
not
fair. Like, really, how fair is that really going to shake out for them? Another thing I think about is, and I don't know if this isn't really subtle, but it is a thing. We need to stop back channeling these references.
Ooh, okay.
Because I think sometimes people assume because their colleagues or peers with someone that the way that person presents to them is how they present to everyone else. So if I am friends with someone who's a little bit closer to the center of that power and privilege wheel, the way they are with someone else in same proximity to them may not be how they present to me. So think about a situation where you have a manager who is leading a team with someone who's neurodivergent. The neurodivergent employee applies for a position somewhere else. They're getting down to the references. They're close to an offer. And then that employer goes to check with the manager they're working for and talk to them. And now this manager who has very biased, who's literally eyeball deep in ableism, right, is giving their subjective take on this employee. Now what's happened, right? You potentially sabotage an employee for a new opportunity.
Yeah.
It is harmful and we need to stop it. Like, I'm still shocked at how many times I hear it now that people are doing it. Some people are posting about it.
Oh, I see that all the time. I'm always like,
dislike about. I'm like, this is not good, right? Not just the potential legalities of it, but just from a human experience. So these are some of the ways that neurodivergent employees there are barriers that are put up for them, and at the same time, it happens to neurotypical employees too.
Okay, so let's just dream. Let's end the episode on a dream. If we rebuilt workplace norms from scratch, what's the first thing you would change and why?
Go with me. Everybody listening. I'm not picking on leaders, but watch this. My mom used to have a saying. She used to say, the fish stinks from the head down. If the fish is not well in the head, the rest of the body isn't either. And I say that because if we rebuilt workplace norms, I'd start with leadership. Thinking about, instead of rewarding for conformity, we train leaders to embrace diversity of thought, like moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, making this best practices, embedding it in competencies, holding accountable, right? And that shift makes inclusion the default, unlocking innovation for everybody, instead of us continuing to live in these narratives that are not serving us well, right? And that leadership is a responsibility, right? Some of the best people I know who I think will make phenomenal leaders and have literally steered away from those positions, right? Because it's a lot, right? People glorify titles and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, you are leading a group of people, you are impacting their lives, whether you realize it or not. And so if we could get leaders to have more awareness, take more action on that awareness, and hold them accountable, we'll be able to move the needle more on neuroinclusion in the workplace.
I love that. We're starting with leaders. Honestly, I'm with you. I'm like, all these leaders, every time I encounter a bad leader, honestly, every time I encounter a good leader, I have this thought that like not everybody should be a leader. Every time I'm like, oh no. Sorry, did you want to add something?
No, I was just going to say, and it's starting with leaders, not necessarily with the things we may necessarily think about. I think integrating more experiences that cause them to see someone else's world from their lens.
Yeah, like helping them with perspective and lived experience. Yep. I 100% agree. I mean, there's so many like privileged leaders out there, and the things I always like watch them when they go viral, where it's like a CEO being like, all of you have to go back to the office from his like remote island. Or he's like in his like mansion and he's like, we're all going back to the office, and they never show up to the office. And like, there's such a disconnect between sometimes leaders and like the average day-to-day experience employees are having, that even starting there with helping them understand perspective and lived experience could go a long way.
Yeah. That's correct.
Privilege. Tameka, this has been so much fun today. For people who want to get in touch with you, I always put LinkedIn in the show notes, but what's the best way to reach you, talk to you, get to know you, work with you?
Yep. So they can, aside from LinkedIn, they can go to my website, modculture.co. They can reach me there and on LinkedIn.
I love it. Well, Tameka, this has been so great. Thank you. I think you'll be back to the pod at some point again. We came up with like 6 other topics today that we could definitely hit up. I'm just really thankful that I've had the chance to like meet you, watch you speak live, and then have you on this pod, because a lot of the things you're saying could help make the life and day difference in like someone's work experience. And I just think all of us could be doing better to include more people in the workplace.
I appreciate you having me today, Hiba. It's been fun.
Yay. Thank you.